everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider, the Purple Insider Fantasy Show with myself, Matthew Coller, and Mike Schopp from the Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast, also of WGR 550 in Buffalo. 2-3-0 podcasters coming to you here. And the show, of course, presented by our friends at Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy sports, also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. Later in the show, we will give you our pick'ems, which are very easy to play. You pick between 2 and 8 stats of your favorite players and choose whether they will go higher or lower. And you can win up to 20 times your money by going 5 for 5. Sign up with the code PURPLE. That helps the show if you want to give that a try. And you get to claim your special pick, first time deposit offer, up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Must be 18 or older. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. All right, Mike, you and I both felt the same way going into the National Football League season. We were saying, look, the Buffalo Bills, they don't have that number one wide receiver. And they could say all day long that they're just going to throw it to everybody, but I'm pretty skeptical about that. Well, Josh Allen might just be that good, that he can just throw it to whoever he wants. I was looking at their target distribution. It literally is everyone. It's just throw it to all people. However, it hasn't exactly been the toughest stretch of opponents for the Bills to start against this season. So give me your analysis of Josh Allen's start to this year. Were we just ridiculously wrong, and he is one of the great quarterbacks? Now he's establishing himself as maybe ever, if he could do this without Stephon Diggs? Or is it 3 weeks and people could figure it out, and let's give it time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. Allen's excellence was really not the point. He was generally, I mean, there are these occasional surveys and things that he comes into question, but that just gets us through the offseason. I think most people would tell you he's one of the 2 or 3 best in the league. And so the Bills knew that going in. He's not old yet, right? Like that was kind of established. The question was, what else was going to happen around him, including on defense? What would that all add up to this season? So I think it's not surprising to see him, even in this situation, really thrive, which he's done. This third game, the Jacksonville game, they threw the ball more. You know, you had low numbers, especially in week 2 against Miami, but you had 10 different receivers catch a pass, and they won by 37 points. Now, at Baltimore, at Houston, at the Jets, their next 3, and that's just a different situation entirely, I think. Not that the Bills can't win all of those games. I mean, they've been that good. They have the league's longest ever streak of consecutive games without a single 7-point loss or more. It's 44 games in a row, which is incredible. So their excellence is established. The Jacksonville game on Monday, I was there, and it just doesn't get any cleaner than that. They couldn't pressure him at all. It's man coverage. I think it was a simple game for him, and really that's the kind of game where you'd expect him to really just dominate, which is what happened. At the Ravens, at the Texans, at the Jets, you know, that's going to be tougher. Although Baltimore, who they play on Sunday night, has given up a ton through the air so far this year. So who knows if that even isn't a nice matchup for him again.
So I guess the fantasy spin here, of course, everyone would have drafted Josh Allen as their quarterback, but the distribution of Bills wide receivers, is there anything interesting to you in that mix?
Yes, I would. So Khalil Shakir is on top so far, and he has a lot of fans. I was questioning the ceiling. Like we talked about what you would really get out of any of these guys if it's going to be the way they're talking about it, and it mostly has. But Shakir is playable in fantasy football as a wide receiver 3 or a flex. I mean, I think Allen loves him and they trust him. He's been here. So I think he is safe enough. I think the other side of it is I'm saying now, I don't think there's any way Kincaid becomes like a dominant pass catcher in this offense. The questions, we try to predict these seasons in real life or in fantasy, and you're trying to figure out a balance between what the organizational investment is, like how good or bad do we look depending on what we get out of this player. Here's a first round pick and they're on the hook. Like they've traded Diggs now. Just seemed logical to think they would really lean into Kincaid, but coaching doesn't have to care about that or even know. I think if you have a perfect situation, that's kind of, well, is what it is. I'm glad you were drafted in the first round. You're probably paid better than the next guy, but I'm going to use you the way I think it's best to use you. And he's not running more routes than Dawson Knox. Like he is playing a complementary role. He's good when they get the ball to him, and he showed that on Monday night. But I would say at this point, it's very unlikely he puts up like a big season because he's just, he's got 8 catches through 3 games. And that's saying all this. It's tough to start a guy like that in fantasy football. It's tough to start any tight end this year so far in fantasy football. So you're not getting buried if you're running out Kincaid because the next guy isn't doing much better.
Hey, Johnny Munt scored a touchdown. I told you guys it's
Conklin.
Johnny Munt, Tyler Conklin. Yes, I was heckling you online about that last week, and even a secondary receiver, Jalen Naylor, was another guy who keeps producing and scoring touchdowns. But as far as tight ends, this seems like a personal crisis for you as trying to figure out, is there any tight end? I imagine all the fantasy owners as Kirk Cousins lofted a ball in the direction of Kyle Pitts in the end zone and a Chiefs player plowed into him, taking him out of the play, and there was no flag and he didn't catch the touchdown. It has not been a great year. This is why actually we said you might want to consider drafting TJ Hockenson, even though he's not going to play for the entire season, because when he does come back, he is going to be a major factor for the Vikings. We haven't seen a ton of production from Johnny Munt or Josh Oliver, but that position is huge in the offense for Kevin O'Connell, or it eventually will be with as good as TJ Hockenson is. So those people who decided to go out on a limb, and I think Hawkinson's going to be back pretty soon here, as soon as he gets off IR, I think you might end up getting rewarded there.
You think before the bye?
Possible he might, because he could come off after week 4.
Yeah.
I don't know how a plane ride and the turf over in London is going to impact that entire formula. I mean, what I know about TJ Hockenson is that the guy is not going to take any more weeks off than he needs to, right? Because he's just that kind of guy. But if I were the team, I would be saying I'm a little worried about London turf and having him debut out there.
And this is the week, and maybe Wednesday as we record, this is the day where players on the PUP list or on IR can start to practice. I think there's maybe the rules are different one versus the other, but there's a 21-day window. I think of Jonathan Brooks in Carolina, where I'm eager to find out if he's on the practice field, which would obviously be a good sign. Look, Hockenson, that was underdog is one thing. Managed leagues are different. In the underdog tournaments, I drafted Hockenson a number of times as a second or even third tight end. He did not go very high because everybody knew his status. And like you said, eventually you get there. And as we've talked about in those tournaments, what really all that matters is those last few weeks. If you can make it to week 15 and be live there, then to have a guy like that, if he's healthy and producing, is huge. In managed leagues, he almost wasn't worth drafting, I think, because you're not going to have, tons of bench space and you're going to have injuries. If you've got Deebo Samuel and Puka and McCaffrey, any collection of these guys, and you drafted Hockenson, you maybe have had to cut him already because you're not cutting those guys and, you need help. Now we're 0-3 maybe in fantasy football and you got to act. It's going to get away from you pretty quick here. So trades and that kind of activity is how you can stay alive. Hockenson, though, well, there's that. You say he's coming back pretty soon, maybe. That's good. Everything you said on how productive he might be able to be. The one thing, though, whether it's underdog or anything else, like I said about Kincaid, whoever you picked that you've been starting, you're probably not getting beat too badly because the other guys aren't doing anything either. It's really incredible. Like Kelce doing so little so far. Laporta, not much, and then injured. McBride, okay, and then injured. Andrews isn't even on the field for Baltimore. What's going on with that? Pitts Kyle Pitts' life is him getting, targeted in the end zone, but interfered with, or it just misses. The one big play he had Sunday night, he gets tackled at the 1 yard line. The flag icon comes up. No, it's against Kansas City. We'll take it. It's like a parade you want to hold when Kyle Pitts makes a catch and, for yards like that, even if you don't get the touchdown. Kittle hurt, Ingram hurt, and Njoku hurt. Ferguson was hurt. You're surviving. I looked at my best ball portfolio on Underdog this morning, and you try, where are my good teams? Who looks good? How good? What's out there? And almost without fail, every team I looked up that is in first or second place in these tournaments is getting nothing out of the tight end position. I had a Noah Fant team that got 10 points or something, or Bowers at least. You've had this week was a step back. So there have been a couple. The likely week in week 1 was huge, but nobody's burying you because no one else is scoring either.
Yeah. Is it random? Is it the passing is down? I mean, injuries is definitely a part of this, but I guess I was wondering if teams trying to take away the middle of the field has played into this to some extent, that at times, and the Vikings have really taken advantage of this since they've gotten Hockenson, as opponents direct their coverage toward Justin Jefferson, there was just a lot of opportunities for TJ Hockenson in the middle of the field. But I don't know if that's something that strategically teams have tried to deal with a little bit more that has taken away these easy buckets for tight ends.
I'm open to that. I'm like you, I'm curious about that stuff. Like, what's the cause? But I think if you go back down the list of players, there are other factors that might supersede any of that. I don't know that Travis Kelce is a victim of, coverages. He's always been better than that anyway. Now he just looks, he's 35. You wonder if there's a lot left there. A lot of teams are playing 2 tight ends more. Take Buffalo. If Dalton Kincaid were all of the tight end usage, then that would be fine, probably so far. But Dawson Knox has a contract, so that isn't the case. And then you have injuries like we went down the list. So there might be the problem with Conklin or even Hunter Henry, some of these guys that were barely drafted, if they were drafted at all in your home leagues, is the position shows over the years, and these players in particular, there's just no consistency. So the guy that brought up Conklin to us after last week's show, I asked on Twitter Thursday night, Hunter Henry or Pitts, and you said Conklin. I'm like, come on. He just sort of, he tweaked me for that. But I did have Conklin in lineups the first 2 weeks, and he caught maybe 3 passes total. And that's tight end life. That's why in these tournaments, it was very much in vogue to make sure you got one of the top guys, of whom there were 6 or 7. And they've all busted. So right now, as in the industry, we're sort of looking up what's happening. Oh, you needed Saquon Barkley instead of Sam Laporta. You needed Kyron Williams or David Montgomery or Kamara instead of Kittle. Like, they went at about the same range. And that can change back. And I think to some extent it will. I'm really sort of confused by the Andrews one. He's 29. He had off-season surgery. He had a car accident in the summer, but he ran 4 routes against Dallas. And they were way ahead. So that might be part of it too. It's still very early. But there might be some scheming. We've seen the trends about teams turning to their running game more. It's often the quarterback doing that running. Do I want to, at least in theory, have 2 tight ends on the field to get more out of that? That would make sense.
So since you brought up Kelce, because I don't have a great explanation for this other than also it's only been 3 weeks and there's no way to tell what's going to happen the rest of the season. It may have just been a random thing that's happened, and Andrews may be battling through injuries to even be active on game day, but can't be as effective as he was. And you mentioned some of the other guys who've gotten banged up. It might have been opponents. There's a lot of different factors that could go into it. But with Kelce in particular, he has been a total non-factor, and it's probably because he's dating a singer. That'll teach you.
He's the first NFL player ever to have a girlfriend.
I think so. Yeah,
and it's ruining the sport, if you ask me.
That's the way it was treated last year. But I'm actually interested in Patrick Mahomes' average depth of target because when you look at Mahomes' stats through the first 3 weeks, and I am always willing to say that a player like Patrick Mahomes, even if he doesn't have the biggest stats, is finding ways to win on a weekly basis so much more than everyone else that he can have a bad day and win a game. And it happens all the time with the great quarterbacks in history, that they don't necessarily need to have a great box score day to find a way to get that one big drive, that one big completion when they're hanging in a game. But at this point, we are going on a year plus of his statistics not being very good. Sam Darnold is kind of blowing Patrick Mahomes out of the water right now. And I want your opinion on this. I mean, he won the Super Bowl last year, so we can't knock him off the number one peg as the top quarterback. But it ran through my mind as I was watching Josh Allen absolutely annihilate the Jacksonville Jaguars that the best quarterback in the NFL might be Josh Allen. And I don't want to say that because Mahomes, this is an icon. This is somebody who's played better at this point in his career than anybody else probably in history from start to where he is now, but his numbers just aren't really the same. And I wonder what you think of that.
It's one of the most interesting debates in sports is the world of QB wins. I mean, you and I have enjoyed that forever, and it's been our type to just try to mock it, right? Like they're just come on with QB wins. The quarterback only has so much control. However, I have a really tough time sort of bumping Mahomes down in any way because they do win all the time. They have won in the playoffs. And it's kind of personal for me because the Bills, like, this is great how they've started, but they're at a stage in their evolution where really it's only the playoffs that matter. Like, Allen will be remembered for wins, for championships. That's how it goes. And if Patrick Mahomes isn't putting stats up, but they're 3-0 and they just want a ring, what can you say? Like, I don't want to be caught criticizing him for that because they are winning these games. You know, I liked Atlanta last week, and you're one play away, and Baltimore and Cincinnati were also one play away from beating them, but ifs and buts, right? So I think, like I said earlier about Allen, we've seen it a lot in his career. He's had monster games, and that one was one of them. But it just isn't going to be about week 3 in the end for either guy. You are right about Mahomes and stats in fantasy. That's what we care about. He has one game, regular season game, over 21 fantasy points in his last 16, like almost a full season. It was against the Chargers last year, who they play this week. New coaches, though. So, like, I have teams where it's Mahomes or Darnold, literally, or it's like it was Derek Carr and Richardson, or Geno Smith and Richardson. Oh, Richardson is the cheat code. I mean, he's going to run. He's not scrambling at all. His passing is really, really bad so far. Turnovers, and I don't know what I've got there. So, me, like, I'm not. I could go down this way. I'm not ready to start the likes of Darnold and Carr or Andy Dalton over Mahomes and Richardson, and even Fields is tough. Fields is easier, but those guys that we drafted so early, I want to trust that. And that can go either way, right? I mean, maybe Darnold will keep it up and have like a great season. So far, so good. He started well before. Interesting test for him this week in Green Bay, but I can't bring myself to, as soon as it just feels this way in life. As soon as you do it, then you get beat. Like I had a team 2 years ago with Trey Lance. Was it 2 or even 3 years ago when he was, I think, a rookie, or yeah, it had to be his rookie year. His second year, he got hurt right away, broke his ankle. So rookie year, everybody's excited. Top 5 pick. It's only Jimmy Garoppolo. This guy's going to happen. And I had a team in the main event at FFPC with Tom Brady and Trey Lance. And, you know, Brady's in Tampa. We'll see. He's 40, 41. And there was a week where Lance got the start. These are the ones you never forget, Matthew. Lance got the start in Arizona, and because Garoppolo got hurt. And Brady started against the Dolphins, I believe. And I just couldn't wait to put Lance in. Like this was my bet that Brady's ceiling is kind of limited, and here comes Trey Lance, and he's inevitable, and here he's going to run, just like the advantage of the running quarterback. Brady never runs at all. Here we go. And Lance just did okay, and Brady threw for 6 touchdowns. Like you have to ask yourself, with due respect to Darnold, he's been a really good pick so far in these best ball tournaments. I love the teams that have him on it. And that all happened late after the McCarthy injury when nobody was really drafting him at all. Before that, I love that setup. But you have to ask yourself how you're going to feel on Monday if you benched Patrick Mahomes or even benched Anthony Richardson for one of these, if you will, journeyman types, and it doesn't go well. Like that is not a good feeling when you lose on a play like that.
Yeah, and there's always points in each season where Mahomes has not played the same way and they find ways to win. And then the light goes on. Andy Reid makes an adjustment. Last year it was Rashee Rice and his emergence and what that meant. This year it might be Travis Kelce playing himself back into shape as an older player, which the ramp up takes a lot longer. It might be seeing new stuff from defenses because every year defenses are cooking up things to try to stop this Super Bowl winning offense, and Mahomes has to try to stay ahead of that. And sometimes I think he just gets a little too Mahomesy. Like, I'm going to just make plays all the time, and they kind of forgets to just run on schedule, and yet still it'll click in at the right time for him. Yeah, I would never rank anyone above him, but I just thought, as of who's playing the best right now, it's not even a question that Josh Allen is, and we'll see where it goes from here. As far as QB wins, where I landed on that overall is the huge sample usually does tell the story. And with Tom Brady, it's like we say, 1-score games are random, right? Or pretty random over a long period of time. Brady is, I think, 30 or 40 games over 500 in 1-score games. So it's not completely random when you have people like that. Who win over and over and over. Like Peyton Manning is 50, 60, 70 games over 500 for his career. I don't think that just happened.
No.
Right? So I think it does, but I think we can use it to give us context of how we got there, right? Like, what did Case Keenum need to get to a 13-win season is a great question. If we just look at his stats without saying it was a 13-win season, what context do we have? It kind of grounds us in what we're looking for.
Yeah. It should correlate, especially over time, with your overall win percentage, right? I mean, if your quarterback can somehow stay in the lineup winning 40% of his games, you kind of want him to win 40% of his close games. But if there's never enough games in football, we're not running 10,000 sims. There's never enough games to really know. If Brady and Manning played in their prime for 1,000 seasons, I mean, I think my personal opinion is that Manning would come out on top, but that didn't happen over a decade or 15 years. And so you have what you have, and almost everybody considers Brady better, which I do not. But yeah, it's a fascinating discussion that kind of never ends, because you want there to be, as a sports fan, you want there to be some real there, because the quarterbacks are our heroes. They're who we talk about. They're the ones that we think you can't live without. And so you want there to be that piece where they can actually they can make the difference late in games, which the debate goes on.
Yes, it does.
It's the Viking team from 2 years ago too, by the way. I mean, there's the Keenum season, but then there's the year where they lose to the Giants, where you had the whole season like, nope. I mean, point differential, come on, no. And then of all teams to beat them in the playoffs, the Giants, I mean, just sort of like perfect, not in a fan way, of course, but just numbers way.
But I think that 2022 season is really instructive about QB wins, because Kirk Cousins throughout his entire career was mostly a 7 to 9 win type of quarterback. But the question was always, how could you get him over the top? How could he have one of those Peyton Manning type of seasons? Because a lot of quarterbacks, if they're good enough, Matt Ryan is an example, Phillip Rivers, where they are good enough year in and year out, so you're never going to be horrible with that guy. Even if your team is really bad and gets injured and has a bad defense, that guy's good enough. But they rarely are good enough to elevate you all the way to the top, to that Mahomes, to that Allen type of level. And so what would it take? What it took was 8 fourth quarter comebacks. It took a team missing a field goal at the end. It took interceptions. It took all sorts of kind of random events. And then when he gets injured, he's 4-4 the next season, kind of goes right back to the same type of thing. But it also showed that it is possible for someone like that to have that type of year. So
Right.
as a franchise, you're trying to decide, do we kind of ride it out through the average seasons, waiting for the one where Matt Ryan wins MVP or Joe Flacco or something? Or do we always try to play this game where you move on over and over? And I think that's the conundrum that the Vikings were in with Cousins for a very long time. Let me shift to a young quarterback who had the most exciting game of the week among, I think, anyone in the NFL, Jayden Daniels. I looked at the box score and then I had to look again, and then I had to, because every once in a while ESPN tweaks out and they'll have the box score just be a data jumbled mess, and you're like, well, let me reload and make sure this is right. Oh, it was right. It was right. 140 quarterback rating, 21 for 23 passing. Scary Terry McLaurin gets a quarterback who could throw him the football. Is this Jayden Daniels? Is this what we're dealing with now in the National Football Conference, Mike?
It's one game, but it was incredible. The eye test, the pass to win it was amazing. The hit he takes, he stands in there, throw it away, fourth down, kick it. Nope. By the way, on him, did you notice that if you watch the game, the last few plays, he was angry, yelling at the bench, Kingsbury, get the play in. You could easily read his lips, get the play in. Come on, come on, come on. And that they did, but he was frustrated, and they called a timeout before that play, and he did not go to the sideline. And I don't remember ever seeing that, like, unless it's just sort of an obvious, we're lining up to kick or something. Like, when does the quarterback not go to the sideline? Rookie in that spot, game on the line. He's like, I think he was so pissed that he just didn't go to the sideline, and he throws that pass on the next play. I mean, that is boss kind of stuff. Fantasy wise, he might be what we've wanted Richardson to be. There are comparisons to Lamar Jackson. I think there are comparisons to Jalen Hurts. You have a younger, fresher version of that. And in terms of fantasy football, he was much cheaper than all of those guys. So you could have, if you have Jayden Daniels on your team, you might have Kyron Williams or Chris Godwin instead. Whereas if you picked Richardson, and I know this because this was me, if you pick Richardson, then you're looking at Jerry Jeudy or somebody like that. You'd much rather have the Daniels side of that right now. One game, but it's very exciting. We live for this. We love it as fans and as fantasy players. Just dual threat. And to see him make those throws is the most exciting part, because he can run. You don't want to see a Justin Fields who really can only run. And he's just not delivering that pass, especially with the game on the line. And there's a lot of that in the NFL right now. So Daniels gives us hope. They have Arizona this week, and here's to that game going off. It'd be great.
I made a decision going into this last draft because I know that in our industry, we try to be right as much as we possibly can. But because the Vikings were drafting a quarterback, my idea was whoever they get, I'm just all in on that guy, because I don't know. I'm not going to say, oh, well, they drafted McCarthy and I didn't like him in Michigan, so they made a mistake. Because I've gotten caught with that before, and Josh Allen is probably one of them, where
Sure.
I thought, oh man, I would have taken Josh Rosen. That's one of the worst opinions I've ever had in my entire life. Josh Rosen's not even in the league. And so I thought, you know what? I'm not any better at this, at picking quarterbacks, than anyone else. So I'm going to look at what the guys can do and what they can be in the environment that they'll need to succeed. And with Jayden Daniels, what I thought was, my biggest concern was Kingsbury, actually. But what I thought was, if he can just get opportunities to hit deep balls and then make plays with his legs, he can manage the rest. And if it clicks, this guy is going to be unstoppable. And what we saw the other night was that's the click. And we don't know if it's going to happen every week, but when you see that click in, I don't think we have yet for Caleb Williams. It may at some point where it just, the light goes on for him. He's going to need some pass protection first, I think, for that light to go on. Washington does have that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's so much more fun than it is to pick which quarterback you think is going to be the best and your order, and then just try to ride that out forever, rather than just we don't really know until these guys are here. And whoa, Jayden Daniels is here.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my mantras over the years is I feel like I very well know what I don't know. And that can be annoying maybe to listen to when you're turning on sports radio and you got the guy in the box who's just talking about, well, I don't know this, but I think it's right. And then somebody might tell you, well, you get it wrong, quote wrong. And like, well, that's why you're not a GM. Well, they get it wrong just as often. Like, come on. What do you think? There's some secret? You don't think the NFL makes mistakes? I mean, pay attention. So yeah, I mean, it's important to know what you don't know. In fantasy, there does come a time where you want to have those player takes. And for me, as somebody that is mostly entrenched in, yeah, this is all going to be pretty random and we're all kind of just guessing at a lot of it. Even players that are established in the league, they change teams or it's coaching change, and you really just have have very little confidence in what it's going to look like. It comes down, to cost. And this year in fantasy football, you and I battled a little bit on whether to lean into rookies. And he was a guy that, so was Drake May, but it never really, it's still, this has been clear, like when he would go in, whereas Daniels was always, like Williams, was always going right in. So that was good to feel good about. There are also players who will never come out. So in a best ball format, that felt really good to have Caleb Williams or Daniels, because if they don't get injured, they're playing 17 games and the upside is really there. So I do like, being aware. It's good in life to be humble about how unpredictable a lot of this is, but you do have to make bets here. And betting on a guy like this always made sense to me. It is very similar to Lamar Jackson coming out. I mean, Heisman winners, best running quarterback of all time. Daniels is maybe on that same level. And if the passing hits, and you saw both guys, Jackson never got near enough credit for how good of a pocket passer he was. He was the best pocket passer in that draft with Allen and Mayfield and Rosen and Darnold. And he still shows that to this day, but his misses get exploited, and he sort of came into the league with that stigma. Whereas Daniels, I think maybe we learned from Jackson. I mean, Daniels got more respect in that area, and that play and that game against Cincinnati definitely supports that.
Oh, I think Lamar Jackson completely changed the way that teams draft. I don't think that anyone even would have picked Anthony Richardson until the fourth round, if not for someone like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, the running quarterback who could be developed. And there's a lot of development that needs to be done still with Anthony Richardson. We're not at the point where I'm concerned yet about him, but a little bit. He needs to play more football games. What I was thinking with Jayden Daniels about him is these quarterbacks who are coming out. It used to be if you drafted a quarterback that was 24 years old, you were just a fool. Like, what are you doing? You can't develop that guy. But now, the way that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah put this, I asked about it at the Combine. Like, how do you deal with the fact that McCarthy is going to be 21, and, Bo Nix and Jayden Daniels are 24. And he basically said that they sort of looked at it as minor league seasons. Like, they would have to try to adjust for that, but that they were still developing and getting better. And you see that in their numbers and everything else when they were in college. More reps is always going to be good for these guys as far as their adjustment. And I think we have to give it to the old school. I always felt like at times that the old school guys who are like, you need to sit your quarterback for 2 years. You're like, okay, Grandpa Simpson, you're yelling at a cloud. That's cute. Let's get to the quarterbacks playing. But I mean, now that we see Sam Darnold playing well, Geno Smith is a borderline great quarterback at this point.
Yeah.
And then we see and I know Daniels is doing it right away, but he's 24. Bo Nix looked a lot better. Michael Penix is sitting. I'm starting to get on board, actually, with as complicated as defenses are becoming and as hard as playing quarterback is. It might almost just be something everyone has to start planning for, is letting the quarterback develop for a year before he goes in.
Yeah, it really interesting stuff. Like, it does ebb and flow. Andy Dalton steps in Carolina and is like, watch this. And he puts up literally the first game of the NFL season with 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. With the season that the league is having, that Andy Dalton in Carolina what looks like a total disaster. It's like, watch this. Here, let me show you how to do this. Andy Dalton. And then Burrow, by the way, did the same thing on Monday night. So now we have 300-yard, 3-touchdown games in the league this year. It keeps us on our toes. It keeps us guessing. I agree with you on Geno, and I just love it. I love the unpredictable nature of it. We'll see if teams slow down on their quarterbacks, because the rookie deal part of it doesn't change here. Like, you want to find out as soon as possible. But it's just great stuff.
My thought on
everybody's having fun with how you brought up some quarterback ages, how Darnold is younger than Burrow.
Somebody mentioned that on a live stream the other night. I was like, no, you can't be serious. But, well, and that's the thing, you throw Josh Allen in, I believe in week 3 against the Vikings, he jumps over Anthony Barr. But even if we look at, that's now a long time ago in the NFL as far as defensive advancements. And when I watch Brian Flores absolutely pummel CJ Stroud, who is still a young quarterback in the league, I'm like, what young quarterback could face this and survive and identify all of this? If Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud are struggling with it, I'm going to ask Chicago's going to ask Caleb Williams to try to figure it out. Good luck to him against this defense. And it's not the only one who's doing a lot of this, making sure that they're not showing anything until after the snap. And now that they've figured out how to do this, it's so much different. Peyton Manning used to go up to the line of scrimmage. He would look around and go, okay, that is zone coverage over there. It's man coverage over there. I know this defense on tape. They play cover 2. And in these situations, Marvin Harrison, you run that way and I'll throw you the ball. And that's not to downplay his intelligence, but it's just to say that those reads were more static. And now this is just catching a lightning in a bottle, trying to even understand what's happening. It's just flashes that you have to react to. And there's so much that has to go into it schematically for the offense to try to solve it, and answers and things you have to memorize and everything else. I imagine JJ McCarthy is sitting at home being like, it is actually probably better that Sam's doing this instead of me. I was thinking that last week as Will Anderson tried to take Sam Darnold's face off, and those guys too, the number of edge rushers as well. So it's a fascinating subject. But who doesn't struggle? Rookie receivers. Now this is where you want to do a little dance there. Neighbors or Harrison? Which one would you prefer going forward?
Oh boy, Dynasty, I probably would still say Harrison. This year, I might flip to Neighbors, but I don't think it's obvious. I mean, Neighbors everybody would tell you the same thing, how good he looks. The target share is there. It looks like a mistake in retrospect in fantasy drafts all off season to have picked Harrison so much earlier than Neighbors. However, in quote home leagues, that was a difference of a few rounds usually, because Harrison was so hyped, and a casual player is more likely to be like, oh, well, Daniel Jones, forget it, I'm not doing that, versus Kyler Murray. But where that's been compensated is by just the target volume. And even if it is Daniel Jones, you're still getting there with Neighbors, who's able to make these incredible catches on maybe less than perfect passes. And, to the credit of the people, most of the people in the industry, like in the fantasy space, they acknowledged that gap should be smaller between Harrison and Neighbors. So Neighbors would go, by the end of the offseason, he would sometimes go in the second round, whereas Harrison would go earlier in the second round. So I think that was pretty accurate. I'm not looking to sell high on Neighbors. I mean, I think it's pretty good. And even if it is the Giants who won in Cleveland, you have the right coach for it. I love having him on my teams right now. Maybe no one except for Rashee Rice, because he was cheaper. It gives me that same sort of feeling of, all right, yes, I can win because I have guys like this. Just got to stay healthy. But I'm not down on Harrison. Tough week 1, has a huge first quarter in week 2. Okay, last week. I think that should also get better. And it's not just them. Odunze had a huge week 3 for Chicago in a troubled offense. So you probably didn't start him, but now you're going to want to. And, generally. And Brian Thomas looks good for Jacksonville. Coleman got in the end zone for Buffalo. We'll see if we get Pearsall on the field. I think Leggett in Carolina is well positioned now with Dalton in and Thielen out. So probably take some time, but yeah, I loved investing in all these rookies. So all off season and teams where I have them on them, that feels good.
I've seen Neighbors in person, so I've only seen Harrison on TV. It's a little different, but the explosiveness of Neighbors, how fast he can accelerate, how high he can jump, it's not quite Megatron, but he is enormous,
Yeah.
and I think that is unstoppable almost no matter what. I don't see quite the same with Harrison as far as he takes two steps and he is by you. That is a Neighbors thing. Or if you throw it up, it's not just can you catch it, it's can you rise up like Derrick Rose dunking a basketball and just keep going, keep elevating and make those catches. I would probably lean a little bit toward Neighbors. The other thing is too, I just don't know who else Daniel Jones is going to throw to all season long. Other than that, going
Right.
into the season, I thought, well, maybe this Hyatt guy will be good. But he's not, and he barely plays.
It's just Wandale Robinson
Yeah,
who's getting a little bit of volume underneath. And, that's okay. But you're right. Like, that was always the question about the Giants and why it looks like correct to think about Neighbors' upside.
it's just Wandale Robinson is my 70s folk album, actually.
Should I have made up a name there?
You could have. I do know Wandale Robinson. Okay, before we get to the pick'ems, I just want to ask you about the Packers. Jayden Reed is their leading receiver in the old fantasy football. Jordan Love may come back this week. I kind of think that he will. Shout out to Mr. Malik Willis for playing as well as you could have, and their coaching is elite. For being able to figure that out the last couple of weeks. But I think Love comes back this week. What do you think about their distribution so far of the run game, the targets to the receivers? Jacobs obviously is going to take a step back when Love comes in, but he's been really good. Running games, I think, are now coming down to just can you block it and can you coach it?
I think Jayden Reed looks like a great player. With the Packers, we discussed in the offseason how tricky it was to be, in a managed league. Who do I actually start here? Can I start Christian Watson? Can I start Dontavian Wicks? Dobbs even? Like, those were tough calls with Love healthy. And then they were like easy no when it came to Malik Willis. But Reed, has done last week, pretty good. He looks like the number one guy, I would say, about Green Bay. Kraft looks like the number one tight end there over Musgrave, and we're just trying to find anything usable at tight end. I think Emmanuel Wilson is interesting for the Packers as the complementary running back to Jacobs. I think he looks better than Jacobs. And LaFleur has always used two. That's one thing about the offseason drafting. Like, we loved Marshawn Lloyd or even A.J. Dillon, but Dillon was miserably bad last year. So Lloyd became kind of a hot item as a complimentary running back, but he's been injured like the whole year, and that left Wilson, who looks like he has some juice. So if Love plays, you do start Jacobs. You probably start Love, although he's interesting for the context of the young quarterbacks against Flores. Did he face Minnesota once or twice last year?
He did. The first time he got destroyed, and the second time he destroyed the Vikings.
That's the story of his year, right?
Yes. The second time, though, the Vikings were banged up on defense, so it was a little bit different. But he certainly earned my respect from seeing him in person. The number of off-balance throws, high difficulty plays that he was able to make. I am curious about his mobility, though, because he isn't mobile in the way that he's going to run for 100 yards, but he's mobile in the way that he's going to buy time for himself and then be facing one way and juke his body in a Matthew Stafford type and let it rip. Is he in good enough shape with his knee to just be torquing his leg on the ground and letting it fire away? Because you have to do that sometimes against the Flores defense.
It's a great game, and it's like the rivalry is renewed here with different quarterbacks. It's not the old days, really. Green Bay, Minnesota, and there's so much to like about both teams. That chess game piece as well. You think Addison plays?
I do. Yeah. It
Okay.
sounds more and more like he's going to. So today they're having a walkthrough, which means that we'll get an estimated injury report. I am suspecting that he will be limited in that estimated injury report. By the time people are listening to this, it's out, but that's my guess. Just the way KOC has talked about it, it sounds like he made a lot of progress last week. It also matches up with that injury. 2, 3, 4 kind of weeks is in the range, and I guess he's dealt with this before, so it's something he knows how to work his way through. How about Thursday night football? What is your pick'ems for this one? I have my silly one.
You do?
I'm ready for it. Yeah.
I thought about maybe not putting mine in and then including yours, but I did go ahead and put it in. And we lost pretty badly last week on the Patriot Jet game. I don't know if this is there's nothing to say about this process. I just felt like when I was making my choices for Pick'em today, it was a little bit too kind of donkey chalk kind of picks, but it still felt right to me. I'm going higher on both the big receivers. I think Lamb, who is by far their number one guy, primetime game. Just think of Dallas's last 3 home games. The Baltimore loss, arguing on the sideline, mostly a blowout. They made it close. The New Orleans game was the same, only didn't get close. And then the Packer playoff loss. I mean, they have just been killed in their last 3 home games. Now they go to play the Giants, who they've owned. And, if I do get rational coaching out of the Cowboys, Lamb should have a big game, I would think. So higher than 81.5 on CeeDee Lamb. Likewise, I'm going higher on Neighbors. Right now, I feel like they can't make those numbers high enough. And there might be still a little bit downward pressure. Oh, he's a rookie. Thursday night football, Dallas. Maybe it doesn't hit, but I'll take my chances. So I don't like being this way, but higher on the obvious stars for each team. I'm also going higher than 14.5 rushes for Devin Singletary. Singletary has become a player now for his 3rd team where coaches just do not want to take him off the field. And so if the Giants can hang around, which is a big if, then I think we get to 15 rushes for Singletary, who is their clear lead back. And because I can't just only pick hires, I'll go, look how smooth I am, by the way, with the higher lower these days. I mean, it's only week 4. Lower on Brandon Cooks at 38.5 yards, because I don't think the game is exactly a shootout. And I do see Dallas going to Jake Ferguson again and Jalen Tolbert, who did a little bit recently in a couple of spots for the Cowboys. So I'll take my chances going lower on Cooks. If you've been playing these pick'ems on Underdog is great at giving you perks. And one thing they'll do is give you kind of like a freebie. So I got, and maybe you would have too, Patrick Mahomes over 1/2 passing yard. So you look for those and you can add them to your pick'ems and, exponentially increase the payouts if you're right. So I threw the free Mahomes pick on there, which leads me to $10 to win 210 if, all 5 go right.
If you'd like to play along Underdog Fantasy, use the promo code PURPLE. Helps the show, and it's a lot of fun. We do it each week with these. My ridiculous pick for this one. So I went a little bit creative here. There are a number of players who don't play a lot of snaps, who just need 1 touchdown, but they give you odds on this. So if you get it right, your money for Daniel Bellinger touchdown is 9 times higher than what it normally would be. So I'm thinking about combining here Luke Schoonmaker and Daniel Bellinger for some one of those 2 players catches a touchdown. All you have to do is just be in the red zone. Everyone's guarding Neighbors. Everyone's collapsing in. And you just, there's Daniel Bellinger. Dump it off. Touchdown. Going for it. Is it a good bet? No. That's why it's got the odds. But I'm going.
No, right. I could see the Dallas one happening more easily than the Giant one. I mean, last week, Tolbert scored. Keontae Turpin. They've got a fullback they throw to now. Like, Dallas can get like that. And Schoonmaker maybe is okay. Bellinger is okay. They have Theo Johnson as well, but creative coaching, maybe. I love the spirit of it.
That is the spirit. The spirit is for me to take a swing at Carson Steele getting one carry, which we got, or the Tyler Conklin incident from last week.
Yeah, he had a huge game. I mean, we should acknowledge that against New England.
and you heard about it. So anyway, we'll see how this, if my streak-ish keeps rolling along. But our streak of really fun shows in the fantasy universe has continued on. The Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast, WGR 550, and every week here on the Purple Insider Fantasy Football Show. So thank you so much, Mike, and we will have so much more to talk about. I'll be coming home from Lambeau next week, and we'll see if we got some 4-0 Minnesota Vikings. That will be very exciting to talk about. So thanks for your time, as always.
Thank you.